Chapter 292. He lowered his head, sobbing, "Little sister, why are you so favored even though we're both daughters? It's like I'm adopted." The problem was that even Mo Wushang's status was higher than his. His father and mother looked at him as if he was their own son. Shin Yueji patted his shoulder solemnly. "In the end, it might be because Big Brother has done nothing all these years. You only know how to cause trouble everywhere and cause trouble for father and mother." Shin Yuechi's face was bitter. "But you forced me to do all these." She raised her eyebrows. "Did I?" Shin Yuechi did not speak. He admitted that he hadn't made much contribution to the general's residence all these years, but his little sister hadn't either. If he had caused so much trouble that he couldn't even count his fingers, then the trouble that Shin Yueji had caused was something that she would never be able to repay in this lifetime. The key was that no matter how much trouble she caused, his parents would only praise and praise her. But he was different. He would either scold or force things into his mouth. The unbearable past made Shin Yuechi cover his face and cry bitterly. Now, even his only little sister was no longer on his side. His life was already very bleak, and there was no hope left for him. He resolutely wiped the tears off his face and strode out. "Big Brother, Drunken Joy Loft is a good place. There are wine and beauties there. If Big Brother feels bitter, you can go there to relax. I believe the beauties in Drunken Joy Loft will be happy to hear Big Brother talk." Hearing this, Shin Yuechi turned around and glared at her. "Just you wait, I'll bring you 10 or even 100 sisters-in-law tomorrow, so that your throat will be dry." When Shin Yuechi left, he happened to meet Double Happiness, who was outside. Seeing his red and swollen eyes, Double Happiness was shocked. "Young master, what's wrong with you? Did Miss bully you again?" After being sullen for an entire day, someone finally asked him what was wrong. Shin Yuechi's tears, which had just stopped, instantly flowed out like an endless stream of spring water. She hugged Shuang Shi and cried her heart out. "Little Gigi only has little Shang in her heart now. Little Chi Chi doesn't exist anymore. Double Happiness, little Gigi. Little Shang. Little Chi Chi." Shuang Shi's mouth twitched. Was this how he addressed his miss, the Prince Regent, and himself? "Eldest young master, weren't you most afraid of the Prince Regent? How dare you find trouble with the Regent? Aren't you afraid of angering the Regent and throwing you out of the general's mansion?" She knew what Shin Yuechi was thinking. Wasn't he just taking advantage of the fact that the Regent liked her miss and wanted to take revenge for the past personal grudges? In the end, he didn't manage to get his revenge. Instead, he was taught a lesson, right? Shuang Shi sighed. The eldest young master was not as smart as her. She had suffered a lot when she followed the young miss, but now she only knew how to flatter. She only listened to what the Regent liked. No matter what the reason was, as long as she knew that the Regent had her miss in his heart, it was enough. Look at the Regent's attitude towards her now. "By the way, eldest young master, the madam and the general have been looking for you for a day. Father and mother are looking for me." Shin Yuechi's eyes lit up as soon as he heard the two elders calling him. He asked in anticipation, "Why are they looking for me? Did you tell me why?" Chapter 293. She looked at the unconscious man who suddenly fell to the ground. Shuang Shi was shocked. She patted his face, but there was no reaction. She mumbled something under her breath. Madam was right. She knew that young master would faint from anger. Fortunately, Madam said that even if young master fainted, she would still carry you over. She held the man's arm with one hand and put the other on her shoulder. She carried him half on her shoulder and walked towards the main hall. The corner of Shin Yueji's mouth curled up into a smile when she saw the scene outside. Although the way people got along in the Shin mansion was weird, there was laughter everywhere. Especially Shin Yuechi. No matter how noisy he was, he could not hide the joy and kindness in his eyes. He said that he was jealous, but in fact, he just wanted to help her test the extent of Mo Wuxiang's feelings for her. Thinking of the original owner of this body, she wondered how happy her life was. Now even the man she had been longing for, secretly fell in love with her. She closed her eyes. Her waist was wrapped in a strong arm. The man's warm and cold voice was close to her ear, hoarse and low. "Didn't you say that you would go to the streets with me to watch the show?" Hearing this, Shin Yueji opened her eyes and looked back at him. She smiled. "Yes, we are going to watch a good show." The carriage stopped at the side of the Phoenix house. Looking at the former bustling Phoenix house, it was now an empty building. "Did you hear? Today, something happened to the Gu clan's third young master in the Phoenix Pavilion." In a fit of anger, the Prime Minister ordered people to seal the Phoenix Pavilion. Even the owner of the Phoenix Pavilion was killed by the Prime Minister in a fit of rage. It has only been a day, but it has spread like wildfire in the capital. Who doesn't know that the Gu family's third young master is loved by Madame Murong and Prime Minister Gu? Now, Madame Murong has to watch her own son die in front of her. It is a pity for the boss of the Phoenix house. Who said it isn't? Not only the boss of the Phoenix house, even the staff of the Phoenix house have been detained by the Gu family. I'm afraid they won't be able to escape death. I heard that Madame Murong loved to eat at the Phoenix house. She was an old acquaintance with the boss of the Phoenix house. Now, for her own son, she has fallen out with him. Even the boss of the Phoenix house was implicated. Shin Yueji frowned as she listened to the whispers of the passers-by. She had never imagined that Gu Ruoqi's death would implicate the Phoenix Tower. The reputation of the Phoenix restaurant in the capital had been there for some years. Ever since she could remember, it had always stood tall in the capital. Murong Yun couldn't put down the dishes here. Every day, she would personally come here. With the Gu family's presence, it could be seen how famous the Phoenix restaurant was in the capital. However, Shin Yueji did not sympathize with the matter of the Phoenix Tower being implicated. Most of the people involved were just some upper-class people who looked down on the lower class and were just mercenaries. She pinched a piece of pastry into her mouth and smiled slowly. "It seems that I can't eat the food of the Phoenix restaurant. Why don't the regent choose another place? Shall we fill our stomachs first?" Hearing this, the man lowered his eyes to look at her and gently reached out to wipe the cake residue from the corner of her mouth. Chapter 294. He was trying to lure her to his Prince Regent's mansion with just a few words. She couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. Shin Yueji opened the curtain and shouted to Ji Chu, who was driving the horse outside, to Drunken Pleasure House. Although Drunken Pleasure House was the biggest brothel in the capital, it was still quiet during the day. It was okay to just eat in a private room. Ji Chu dutifully parked the carriage at the entrance of Drunken Pleasure House and opened the curtain. "Miss Shin, please." Shin Yueji jumped out of the carriage first. After Shin Yueji jumped out, Ji Chu closed the curtain directly, completely forgetting that his original master was still sitting inside. He dutifully and respectfully led the way in front. "Miss Shen, this subordinate will go and arrange for old mother to prepare another quiet and secluded dining room." Compared to Ji Chu's betrayal, Shuangxi's betrayal was even more thorough. She opened the curtain and saw a handsome face that was so cold that it could freeze. "Son-in-law." The two words, son-in-law, made Mo Wuxiang's cold expression slightly better. He walked out of the carriage with cold and dignified steps. Shin Yueji sat on a round chair in a private room on the third floor. She saw old mother pushing the door open and coming in. Her eyes fell on her. Old mother saw that it was still this familiar face and immediately greeted her with a smile. "Miss, it's you again. You didn't come with my husband this time." Shin Yueji didn't say anything. She just shrugged and motioned for her to look back. Old Mother looked back and saw Mo Wushang's dark face walking in. His handsome facial features were like a sculpture, making it hard for people to separate from him. However, his eyes were frighteningly cold, making people not dare to stare at him too closely. After all, the old mother was a person who had been doing business for many years. She could see through the character of the people who came to this drunken joy house at a glance. Although this young master had an extraordinary bearing and was handsome, he was not someone who could be looked at too directly. Soon, she forced herself to withdraw her gaze from Mo Wushang and looked at Shin Yueji. "Young lady and young master, please wait a moment. I'll order people to prepare the best dishes of my drunken joy brothel. I guarantee that they'll be served to you." Shin Yueji held her cheeks and narrowed her eyes. She didn't forget to remind her before she left, "We're here to eat, not to do anything else. It's best if the food is served clean." The old mother was stunned. Then, she nodded and smiled. "Don't worry, young lady. I still have this little bit of integrity." The old mother retreated respectfully. Shin Yueji glanced at the man standing not far away, pulled over a round chair, and patted it. Mo Wushang immediately walked towards her and sat down beside her. "The emperor said that he will be back in 3 or 4 days. Including today, I have been back for 2 days. If there are no accidents, the emperor should be back at the general's mansion tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to bring me back to the palace." The man's eyes turned cold. Shin Yueji poked him with her finger. "What's with your expression? I'm reminding you that when the emperor returns to the general's mansion, you're not allowed to sneak in. At that time, my father will definitely arrange for the emperor to live in the same room as me. You." Chapter 295. I'm doing this for the sake of our future, and even more for the sake of the general's mansion. Hearing her say the word future, the man's dark eyes flashed and he looked directly at the girl's delicate white face. "Miss, look, it's young Master Shangwan." The man moved his thin lips and was about to reply. Suddenly, she heard Double Happiness's shout from the window. Following Double Happiness's guidance, Shin Yueji got up from the man's lap and walked to the window to look at the opposite second floor. The man was dressed in a white robe, and a bold woman was hanging upside down on his arm. If Shin Yueji hadn't recognized that face at first glance, she would have found it hard to believe that the man who repeatedly promised her affectionately that he only had feelings for her turned around and took another woman into the drunken joy building. Looking at the woman's figure, especially her appearance, Shin Yueji had a sense of déjà vu. She tried hard to find this person in the original body's mind. Isn't this the second daughter of the Zhangsun family, Zhangsun Wuyan? Beside her, Double Happiness said. Zhangsun Wuyan's beauty was not as good as Zhangsun Wuyue's, but she was also the daughter of a humble family. Because she was born of a concubine, her reputation in the capital had always been inferior before Zhangsun Wuyue entered the palace. Until Zhangsun Wuyue entered the palace, the eldest daughter of the family was gone, and she was the second daughter. Slowly, she gained some reputation in the capital and began to have some status among the daughters of some aristocratic families. How did Zhangsun Wuyan get together with young Master Shangwan? And seeing them enter the room so intimately, it could be imagined what men and women who came to the drunken joy building wanted to do when they entered a room alone, especially on the second floor. Double Happiness angrily stared at the two people who entered the room. The door was closed, blocking the view. "Miss, there is no good person in the Zhangsun family. This Zhangsun Wuyan must have taken a fancy to young Master Shangwan's identity and outstanding appearance. You can't let her trick succeed." In the capital, before this, the matter of Shangwan Yu's infatuation with Shin Yueji, the eldest daughter of the general's mansion, was not a strange thing. But after Shin Yueji entered the palace, this matter slowly became a conversation after tea and gradually faded away. Zhang Sun Wuyan must have known that Shang Wanyu was rejected by her, so she used this opportunity to climb into his bed. In order to achieve her goal, the daughter of an aristocratic family would use all kinds of methods. It was not a rare thing, but some men were willing to fall for it. That was their own problem. Shin Yueji would never forget the look in Shang Wanyu's eyes when he was rejected by her in the general's mansion. Undisguised hatred and revenge. She shook her head and quickly retracted her gaze. That's his own business. Now that he's conscious and hasn't been drugged, he can be with whoever he wants. Moreover, it's clear that the two of them are in love. Although Zhang Sun Wuyan is the daughter of a concubine, she is still a beauty. If the two of them help each other. Miss, this servant would rather young Master Shangwan find a woman from the drunken joy brothel than have him get involved with the people of the Zhang Sun family. None of the people of the Zhang Sun family are good. Young Master Shangwan just loves. Chapter 296. The young miss didn't like him in the first place. If he did this, wouldn't it be obvious that the young miss hated him? Moreover, I also heard that Zhang Sun Wuyan's private life is very messy. I don't know how many men she has had an affair with, and she has an infectious disease. Miss, you can't let this little bitch ruin Master Shangwan. Oh. Really? Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows. Infectious disease. This sentence had a hidden meaning, and she quickly figured out where he was referring to. But in her heart, she really didn't have any feelings for Shang Wanyu. Besides, she had rejected him. He could not have the ability to find a woman to entertain him, could he? Besides, she didn't intend to occupy him. It had nothing to do with her who he slept with or who he married. From Shuangxi's words, it seemed that he could marry anyone but Zhang Sun Wuyan. Her head hurt again. But what did it have to do with her? Forget it. Looking at Double Happiness's expectant eyes, she just took it as giving her face. In the future, it was Shang Wanyu's business who he married and who he slept with. It was fine as long as the woman of Zhang Sun family couldn't marry into the Shangwan family. What Shang Wanyu wanted was a diligent and thrifty wife who was gentle and virtuous, not a scheming woman who had affairs with many men and had ulterior motives to marry into the Shangwan family. Just for the sake of his infatuation with the deity all these years, Shin Yueji persuaded herself in her heart. Miss, this Zhang Sun Wuyan once whipped you before. Do you still remember? Whipped me. The deity. At that time, Miss was wholeheartedly focused on the Prince Regent. Zhang Sun Wuyan suddenly lashed out from the crowd when Miss passed by. If I hadn't reacted in time, the whip would have hit Miss's face. Miss's face would have been disfigured. At that time, Zhang Sun Wuyan refused to admit it. She said that she didn't do it. Someone framed her. In fact, back then, Zhang Sun Wuyue had colluded with her. She wanted to ruin your beautiful face, Mississippi. Was there such a thing? Shin Yueji's eyes were dangerous. She narrowed her eyes. If that was really the case, she wouldn't be meddling in Shang Wanyu's business anymore. Zhang Sun Wuyan wanted to marry into the Shangwan mansion, but she wouldn't let her get what she wanted. She was avenging the original owner of this body. Go. She pushed the door open and was about to leave. Behind them, Ji Chu watched as they chatted as if there was no one else around until they left. He looked worriedly at his master, who was sitting quietly at the side. Master, Miss Shin has gone. I know. You know. If it was in the past, Master would have long been filled with jealousy. But why was he so calm today? He was so calm that he thought he had seen a ghost. This was so unlike his master. Mo Wushang propped up his chin and leaned against the tea table. He watched the young girl's slender back until she disappeared around the corner. Only then did he withdraw his gaze. She took a sip of the teacup she had just used. How can a mere Shangwan you compare to my beauty, virtuous, pure and clean? Ji Chu, fuck. What did he hear? Didn't Master hate it when people called him beautiful? Beautiful, virtuous, pure and clean. This, wasn't virtuous used to describe women. Ji Chu had a headache and held his forehead. It was over. Had Master been turned gay by Miss Shin? However, there was still more horror to come. Ji Chu looked at the servants of Drunken Joy brothel coming up with food. As soon as the plate of prawns was served, his master immediately began to peel the prawns and put the peeled prawns on a clean plate. He didn't need to think to know who the prawns were for. That serious expression, that skillful technique, Ji Chu bowed his head in resignation. Chapter 297. In the wing room on the second floor. It's normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines since ancient times. Young Master Shangwan only has Shin Yueji in his heart, but he has never received any response from the beauty. Yen knows that young Master Shangwan's heart is in pain like being pricked by a needle. Zhang Sunwuyen pushed the man to the bed, her slender jade-like hands making a gesture on the man's chest. Her fingers quickly slid through the half of the robe and slipped inside. She whispered in the man's ear, "Sometimes, women just don't like good or bad. The more you rely on her, the more she doesn't put you in her eyes. But, when you wholeheartedly gave your heart to someone else, she felt unreconciled. Young Master Shangwan, I have seen this kind of woman many times. Your infatuation, I can see it with my own eyes. Otherwise, why would I help you to test Shin Yueji's heart? My sister and Shin Yueji were as close as sisters. Even I know Shin Yueji's character. If she knows that young Master Shangwan and I have an affair, if she has you in her heart, she will definitely come looking for you angrily. At that time." She smiled slightly. "You can know whether she has you in her heart or not." She leaned over and kissed the man's lips. "Young Master Shangwan, you don't have to feel sorry for her. She has already become the Emperor's woman, but you still keep your chastity for her. Moreover, it's not surprising that a man has several women. What do you think?" Shangwan you didn't speak and let her press him. Before this, when she found him, she had said a lot. In the past, he was most disdainful of such means, but when he thought of Shin Yueji's strange attitude towards him and her indifferent eyes, what she said was right. His heart felt as if it was pricked by a needle. For her, he carefully followed by her side, sacrificed so much for her, learned martial arts for her, and suffered all these years, all without complaint or regret, just to make her happy, but in the end, what did he get in return? Time after time of indifference, time after time of sarcasm, yes, why was it that he had to be the one paying the price every single time? Every single time, he had to carefully care about her feelings, afraid that he would make her unhappy, but she had never looked him in the eye. After so many years of infatuation, he was already tired. Especially if he couldn't get any response from her, his infatuation would turn into hatred, intense hatred. He turned over and pressed Zhang Sunwuyen under his body. Looking at such a beautiful and intelligent woman, he waved his hand and tore apart the thin dress on her body. He put one hand on her soft body without any cover. His eyes were calm and indifferent, and the corners of his mouth hooked up into a gentle smile. "You are right. A man should have 3 wives and 4 concubines. No matter what, since you have lost your chastity to me today, I will take responsibility for you until the end. Although I can't give you the position of the first wife, the status of a concubine is enough to match you." Zhang Sunwuyen was delighted to hear that. Although the Shangwan family wasn't an official's family, they were one of the few wealthy families in the capital city. Their business was very big, and it was many times better than the children of the officials' families in the capital city. Moreover, Shangguan Yu was handsome and the only male in the Shangguan family. He didn't have any wives or concubines, so if he married her, she would be no different from the mistress of the Shangguan family. To her, this was a gift from the heavens. Chapter 298. For someone as outstanding as young Master Shangguan, there will definitely be countless women flocking to fight for him. In the past, Shangguan Yu hated this kind of woman the most. Watching her red lips open and close, his vision gradually blurred, and his face slowly overlapped with Shen Yueji's. Finally, there was some warmth in his eyes, and he gently stroked the girl's face. He lowered his body and kissed her heavily. His big hands walked fiercely and gently on her naked body, gradually stroking her beautiful jade-like long legs, and gradually moving up. Oh, Zhang Sun Wuyan murmured uncontrollably, and her hands unbuttoned his clothes. Soon, the clothes covering their bodies were gradually reduced. Dry wood and raging fire lingered endlessly. Zhang Sun Wuyan's heart was filled with endless joy. She didn't expect that she would succeed in seducing Shangguan Yu. Sure enough, men were all the same. Shangguan Yu was the same. She knew where his weakness was and what he wanted, so she didn't waste so much time talking to him. From the beginning, he looked at her coldly. To the end, when he heard her mention Shen Yueji and said that she could help him get Shen Yueji, he stopped. Men were not only easy to deceive, but also pitifully stupid. It was the first time for this man, and she got such a perfect man so easily. Zhang Sun Wuyan boldly wrapped her legs around the man's strong waist. As long as she seduced Shangguan Yu, she could marry into the Shangguan family and become the hostess of the Shangguan family. She would no longer have to bear the anger of those concubines in the mansion. She would no longer have to play with them. Young Master Shangguan. Oh. Give me. Give me. Her bold words stimulated the desire in the man's heart. He lingered in her arms, kissed her, and was about to straighten up and enter her. Bang! There was a loud noise. His figure suddenly froze. Zhang Sun Wuyan was startled, and instinctively pulled the brocade quilt to cover her body. Then she looked timidly and resentfully at the person who spoiled her plan at the door. When she saw Shen Yueji, her little face, which had not yet faded from crimson, suddenly turned pale. Then, he looked at Shangguan Yu. He was obviously flustered. He hurriedly put on his clothes, but at this moment, the more anxious he was, the more he couldn't dress properly. This was the first time he had lost his composure and panicked. His white robe was tied into a few knots on his body. He didn't even dare to look at Shen Yueji's face. Yes, just a second ago, he said that he loved her, that he wouldn't marry anyone but her, and that he was willing to do anything for her. But in the next second, he almost, thinking of this, his eyes were full of annoyance. It was all his fault. He shouldn't have listened to Zhang Sun Wuyan's words. This time, she had seen it with her own eyes. He was afraid that she would hate him even more. What? Did I come at a bad time? Spoiling their plans. Young Master Shangguan, are you still able to wear these clothes or not? If you really can't put it on, why don't you let the one lying under you put it on for you? The cold and sarcastic words made Shangguan Yu's heart ache. He hurriedly put on his robe, got out of bed, and walked to her. His expression was full of panic, as if he had been caught having an affair outside by his wife. Listen to my explanation. Shen Yueji curled her lips into a smile and gestured to him. Seeing this, Shangguan Yu was instantly silent. Chapter 299. Young Master Shangguan, you don't have to explain to me. You and I have nothing to do with each other. You've held back for more than 20 years. It's natural for you to find a woman to vent some of your feelings. But, she raised her eyebrows slightly. Young Master Shangwan, don't you know what kind of woman you can sleep with and what kind of woman you can't sleep with? Listening to her bold and naked words, Shangwan Yu wanted to find a hole to hide in. His face was completely pale. He had heard of Zhang Sun Wuyan's reputation in the capital. But just now, with her instigation, he thought she was Shen Yueji, so he couldn't control himself. He stepped forward and wanted to hold Shen Yueji's hand. Shen Yueji avoided him cleverly, walked to a round chair and sat down. I came here to remind young Master Shangwan that although your Shangwan family is not a family of officials, compared with the important officials in the capital, your Shangwan family has a lot of prestige. If you have a physical relationship with Zhang Sun Wuyan, it will be the face of your Shangwan family that will be lost. In other words, her slender fingers lightly knocked on the table. The crisp sound came into his ears, with the same undisguised sarcasm as her words. This woman didn't appear earlier or later, but appeared in front of young Master Shangwan at this time. Her purpose is obvious. The Zhang Sun family is a wolf's den. I advise young Master Shangwan, it's better to sharpen your eyes as soon as possible. Shen Yueji. The good thing was so close, but it was ruined by the sudden appearance of this bitch. Zhang Sun Wuyan's pretty face was ferocious. I don't think I've offended you. Young Master Shangwan is infatuated with you. It's you who trampled on his heart again and again. Now he wants to start a new life. Why do you stop him again and again? Or, Shen Yueji, you have selfish motives. In the past, Zhang Sun Wuyan was afraid of her. After all, there was a difference between the legitimate wife and the concubine, and she was the apple of Shen He's eye. Especially now that she entered the palace, her status was higher than others. Zhang Sun Wuyan was jealous and afraid of her. She felt aggrieved and flustered. She had finally succeeded in her plan, but it had been forcefully destroyed by her. She might as well go all out, and her face was full of resentment and resentment. When Shangwan Yu heard the word selfish, he subconsciously looked at Shen Yueji, and there was a flicker of light in his sad eyes. Was Ji really selfish? Did that mean that Ji still had a place for him in her heart? However, selfish. Shen Yueji suddenly smiled and raised her eyebrows at her. You're right, I do have my own selfish motives. If Master Shangwan wants a woman, I can personally choose a suitable one for him. As for you, I just don't like you and want to ruin your plans. What can you do to me? You will suffer retribution. Zhang Sun Wuyan was so stifled by her shameless words that she almost fainted. Even if I have to suffer retribution, it will be behind you. Chapter 300. She knew that Zhang Sun Wuyan intended to smear her reputation in front of Shangwan Yu. Shen Yueji didn't care at all and smiled slightly. Your sister only has herself to blame. As for you, you and your sister are almost the same. I don't have such a familiar relationship with you. What sisterly love? How come I don't remember that my parents gave me an older sister or younger sister? You. Zhang Sun Wuyan struggled to jump down from the bed. Shen Yueji narrowed her eyes and didn't move. Sure enough, at the moment when she waved her hand toward herself, the man in white blocked in front of her. Her hand, which was raised in mid-air, was also imprisoned by the man's big palm. Young Master Shangwan, Zhang Sun Wuyan looked up at him in disbelief. Shangwan Yu's eyes were so cold that it could make people fall into a cellar. He looked at her coldly. Bang! Her entire body flew out uncontrollably. The clothes that hadn't been put on slid down the ambiguous mark on her snow-white neck. When he saw the ambiguous mark on Zhang Sun Wuyan's neck, it was obviously left by the man just now. Not only did Shen Yueji notice it, but even Shangwan Yu's face suddenly turned pale when he saw the kiss mark on the woman's neck. His tall body was about to collapse. He was now full of regret and hatred. From the beginning, he shouldn't have stopped because of Zhang Sun Wuyan's words. Young Master Shangwan, you've said it before. You've said that you'll take responsibility for me. You've said that you'll welcome me into the mansion as a concubine. You've promised me all of this in bed. This time, Zhang Sun Wuyan had completely thrown away her dignity. She saw that the two people's gazes were on her, so she deliberately exposed the mark on her neck and looked at Shen Yueji with a proud expression. The girl sitting by the tea table rubbed her eyebrows with a headache. I haven't slept yet, have I? Why should I take responsibility? How about? She looked at the pale-faced teenager not far away and smiled. Young Master Shangwan, do you want to enjoy the unfinished business? Yueji. You know my feelings for you. I can't bear young Master Shangwan's sincerity. Do you still want this woman? If you don't want it, I'll take it with me. Shen Yueji couldn't be bothered to continue this topic with him. She squinted at Zhang Sun Wuyan in the corner and spoke indifferently. Shangwan Yu only looked at her and did not speak. A thin line of blood appeared on his tightly pursed lips. He stared at her without blinking. How could she be so calm? If he still had some intention to test her just now, he would be happy because of her sudden intrusion, and he would think that she might still have him in her heart, but now, she had become a spectator, and the disdain in her eyes stung his eyes. His heart throbbed in pain, as if it was being ripped out alive. After a long while, she heard his hoarse voice mixed with suppressed anger. Where do you plan to take her? Young Master Shangwan, you don't have to worry about this. This is a personal grudge between me and second Miss Zhang Sun. Since it's a personal grudge, I'll definitely find a place where no one is around to settle it. No. Young Master Shangwan, save me, please save me, don't let her take me away, she's up to no good, she'll kill me. Young Master Shangwan, save me. Chapter 301. Yen really admires young Master Shangwan. Please save me. Don't let her take me away. Young Master Shangwan. The girl cried like a pear blossom in the rain. A large part of her delicate makeup was ruined. She looked embarrassed and pitiful. Shangwan Yu looked at her indifferently. His complicated eyes fell on Shen Yueji for a long time. Shen Yueji crossed her arms. If you feel sorry for this girl, you can keep her. If you want to take her as a concubine, it's up to you. I've done my best. I've said what I should say. Of course. She shrugged indifferently. If you want to protect her, just do it. If Double Happiness didn't ask me to come here today, I wouldn't have asked you even if you slept with her here. After saying this, she turned around and left. Shen Yueji. Shangwan Yu cried out to stop her. Shen Yueji didn't stop. Shangwan Yu grabbed her hand in a panic. I won't marry her. I just thought she was you. He explained in panic. You have to believe me. I only like you. I won't take a concubine. Today was just an accident. I promise you, it won't happen again. If you want to take her away, I won't stop you. If she makes you angry, I'll kill her for you. This time, Zhang Sun Wuyan's face was pale and bloodless. She didn't expect that Shangwan Yu would lower himself to this extent in order to make Shen Yueji happy. Was this still the elegant and gentle eldest young Master Shangwan that she knew? Shen Yueji squinted at him. The man's eyes were earnest and sincere. There seemed to be countless words in them. She slightly raised her lips. Double Happiness. I'm here. Throw her out. Yes. Throw. Zhang Sun Wuyan wouldn't forget that she said the word throw. She hadn't put on her clothes. After hearing Shen Yueji's words, she became more flustered and hurriedly got up to put on her clothes. double happiness moved faster than her. He directly lifted her up and threw her down the street on the second floor. Ah, she screamed. It caused a lot of sensation. Especially after she threw him away, her scattered clothes were blown away by the wind. Most of the onlookers recognized her and immediately surrounded her. Zhang Sun Wuyan was so ashamed that she didn't want to show her face. She casually picked up a tattered piece of clothing to cover her body and fled barefoot. Zhang Sun Wuyan has had affairs with many men, and her body has long been infected with an illness. Young Master Shengwan, you can vent if you want, but don't ruin yourself because of this. After saying this, Shin Yueji no longer looked at him and left. From the beginning to the end, when Zhang Sun Wuyan was thrown down to the second floor by her double happiness, he didn't even ask a single word. It was as if he had long removed Zhang Sun Wuyan from the matter, becoming an irrelevant person. This time, Shengwan Yu did not stop her. She had her own reasons for the initial joy. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come at this time and thrown Zhang Sun Wuyan down. But now, Shengwan Yu's heart was chilled to the bone. She was just returning the favor to him. Such an embarrassing scene was witnessed by her. Shengwan Yu knew that he had no face to pester her at this time. Chapter 302. Are you satisfied? After leaving the room, Shin Yueji glanced at Shuangxi, who couldn't hide his pride. Zhang Sun Wuyan will be in trouble this time. She has lost the face of the Zhang Sun family. It seems that Lord Zhang Sun won't be able to raise his head in the capital in a short time. Hearing that, Shin Yueji sneered. That's not necessarily the case. The Gu family is in the limelight now. Their momentum far surpasses the Zhang Sun family. How can the clowns of the Zhang Sun family compare to the Gu family? She thought of the man's handsome and calculating face. Shuangxi. Miss? How much do you know about Shengwan Yu? For as long as this servant can remember, young Master Shengwan has always liked to be by your side. All these years, this servant has seen it with my own eyes. In terms of talent and knowledge, there aren't many people in Feng country who can compare to young Master Shengwan. But Master Shengwan's behavior today is really disappointing. Previously, this servant was crying out for injustice for young Master Shengwan. Now, it seems that he is the same as those men. He keeps saying that he likes Miss, but in the end, he is still having an affair. When this servant returns, I must tell Madam and General about this. Since her rebirth, Shin Yueji rarely panicked, especially when she thought of the way Shengwan Yu looked at her. There was remorse and possessiveness in his eyes. That possessiveness was like a toy. If he didn't get it, he wouldn't give up. I'm afraid this Shengwan Yu is not easy to deal with. Don't worry, Mississippi Master Shengwan and the General have been good friends for decades. They won't fight over such a small thing. Besides, you have already entered the palace, and Master Shengwan has been persuading Master Shengwan to give up. Shin Yueji couldn't explain it clearly in a few words. She shook her head. We've been out for so long. That guy must be anxious. Miss, are you talking about the son-in-law? Hearing that, Shin Yueji smiled and didn't get angry. You're getting more and more comfortable with calling him son-in-law. Although the man's eyes were cold and inhuman, there was a gentleness like the spring breeze and drizzle in those icy eyes. They were black, like bright stones, emitting light and radiance. What she liked was the purity of his black eyes, without any impurities. When he rubbed against her affectionately and called her name, even the coldness in his eyes faded, leaving only a gentle warmth. Such sincerity, Shin Yueji suddenly smiled and pushed the door in. When she saw that the man was still sitting in his original position, and in front of him, there was a plate of slowly peeled shrimp. He covered it carefully to prevent the heat from evaporating. He was waiting for her return with great care. Although there were many men in the world, she realized that it wasn't a bad thing to have Mo Wuxiang accompanying her for the rest of her life. He was like a replica of the woman from the Foam Nation, patiently waiting for her husband to return and personally serving him food and peeling prawns. She took a few steps towards the man. He picked up a piece of prawn and put it in his mouth, chewing slowly. Regent's speed of peeling prawns is really getting better and better. I've only left for a while and you've already peeled so much. Ji Chu at the side. Wasn't he? The way he peeled prawns to vent made him suspect that his master's previous confident words were all nonsense. Mo Wuxiang peeled a prawn and put it in her mouth. Shen Yueji opened her mouth quickly. The man's obscure eyes fell on her red lips for a moment. You have to remember that I'm a match. Chapter 303. Shen Yueji looked at the man's handsome face, which didn't seem to be angry. There was a hint of anger in his handsomeness. She felt that he was extremely adorable and couldn't help but pinch his handsome face. I know. You're the perfect match. You're the perfect match. She promised again and again. Although there was no relationship between her and Sheng Wanyu, she felt inexplicably happy to see the man acting like a jealous little wife. She picked up a piece of prawn and brought it to his lips. The man opened his mouth obediently. Let's go back if you're full. We've been out long enough today. Ji Chu almost burst into tears. He could guarantee that his master only peeled prawns for Miss Shen and didn't eat a single piece of food. Apart from that mouthful of prawns that Miss Shen fed his master, but Mo Wuxiang nodded happily. It's getting late. Let's go back and sleep. Ji Chu, the four of them just went downstairs. When they walked to the door, the man was dressed in white. His pale face had yet to regain its color. Shen Yueji frowned when she saw who was blocking the way. She was dissatisfied. Why? Sheng Guanyu's unfriendly gaze fell on Mo Wuxiang, but his words were directed at Shen Yueji. Why can he do it, but why can't I? 3 black lines appeared on her forehead. Shen Yueji looked at him speechlessly. Just because he is the regent of the Foam country who is on equal footing with the emperor. Is it because of his identity? You can be with him just because of his identity. Sheng Guanyu's expression was full of grief. At this moment, his heart was already full of holes. He couldn't understand how he couldn't beat Mo Wuxiang other than his identity. Although his Shengguan family wasn't an official's family, they were still rich in the capital. He could satisfy whatever she wanted. Even if it was the stars and the moon in the sky. She always rejected him because she was the emperor's woman, but here she was with another man. His voice was almost pleading. What happened today is all my fault. I don't know how to explain it to you. Please forgive me. I swear that this kind of thing will never happen again. Shen Yueji looked at him indifferently. This matter has nothing to do with me. If Master Shengguan has nothing else to say, please step aside. The regent and I have to go back. Sheng Guanyu took a deep breath so that his eyes would not be so red. They were so red that he wanted to kill someone. He forced a smile and said, I'm not here to find but to find the regent. I have something to say to the regent alone. Shen Yueji frowned and looked at him impatiently. Why did this man never stop pestering her? She was just about to reject on behalf of Mo Wuxiang. She wasn't worried about Mo Wuxiang, but himself. If he was alone with Mo Wuxiang, wouldn't he be beaten half to death by this man? She was here to suppress him, so he was very obedient. If she wasn't here, Sheng Guanyu wouldn't get any advantage at all. Doesn't want to hear me talk or see me. You can't reject me even when I have the chance to talk to the regent, can you? Chapter 304. Shin Yueji didn't want to continue being entangled with him, and if she didn't give him a chance to be alone with Mo Wushang, she would definitely not give up. She could only get close to the man and whisper, "It's good to teach him a small lesson so that he will give up." Double happiness, let's go. Shangguan, you really came to find Mo Wushang this time. He didn't even look at her when she left with double happiness. His hateful gaze fell on Mo Wushang, and she couldn't ignore it. Such hatred, resentment, and viciousness. Once, Ji wholeheartedly admired you, wholeheartedly for you. In order to get a look from you, even if it was just a cold glance, she made a fool of herself. Who knows how many times her reputation has been ruined. Now, what is your purpose? What are you trying to do by getting close to her? Shangguan Yu's every word was cold and ruthless. The hatred in his words couldn't be ignored. Mo Wushang, in terms of status, I am indeed inferior to you. But in terms of feelings, I have admired Ji for many years, and it is definitely not inferior to yours. Ji is the best girl in this world. I don't want you to deceive and use her to achieve your own goals. Shangguan Yu said a lot of words in one breath. Every word could be said to be full of emotion and reason. Mo Wushang listened indifferently. Seeing that Shangguan Yu stopped, he looked at him and asked, "Are you finished? From the moment you treated another woman as Ji you are not qualified to be compared with me." His indifferent words made Shangguan Yu's originally pale face turn pale again. What do you mean? Ji Chu originally thought that according to his master's previous conduct, he wouldn't be willing to talk nonsense with Shangguan Yu and lower his own status. But unexpectedly, when he heard his master show off his loyalty to Miss Shin, the corner of his mouth twitched. Master really couldn't do anything but amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Mo Wushang's aura had long been worn down by that woman. He looked at him indifferently. Even so, his blade-like eyes made people sincerely not dare to look at him directly. This king made it very clear that Ji is irreplaceable in this world, but you. He narrowed his eyes, and a dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. You took that lowly woman as her. Mo Wushang's words were as calm as a cool breeze. However, Shangguan Yu's heart could not calm down for a long time. He staggered back a few steps. Was it just because of this? Just because he lost his composure for a moment? No, he looked up suddenly. She directly met the man's indifferent eyes that swept over. Do you know why Ji dotes on me? Ji Chu was speechless. Shangguan Yu looked at the man in front of him in disbelief, as if he couldn't believe that the man in front of him was the Prince Regent that he had once been familiar with. The current him gave him the illusion that he was in a trance. It was more like a favored concubine showing off to him that she had obtained her husband's special favor. You, because I am pure. I only have feelings for her. You are fake. The man replied in a serious tone. Ji Chu was too ashamed to look at him. He covered his old face. Alas, young Master Shangguan, just get used to it. The Prince Regent is no longer the Prince Regent. Chapter 305. No. I don't believe it. I don't believe that you really like Ji. You're just using her. The person you like is obviously Gu Yuqin, the eldest daughter of the Gu family. As for Ji, I know your attitude towards her. You don't like her, you. Shangguan Yu wanted to say something. Mo Wushang glanced at him indifferently. I really don't like her. I love her. His cold eyes narrowed slightly. I love her, not her body, but everything. Hearing this, Shangguan Yu suddenly sneered, Love? Didn't you say that you loved the eldest daughter of the Gu family? Where did you go when she was sentenced to death by the emperor? Mo Wushang, I don't care what your purpose is. If you dare to hurt a hair on I'll fight you to the death. The man's cold and handsome face slowly returned to normal. The cold and emotionless regent seemed to have possessed him at this moment. His loose black robe couldn't conceal his cold and bloodthirsty aura. His eyes, which had been soaked in an ice pool, made people feel cold. His thin lips, which had been cut by a knife, were pressed into a straight line. Just when Shang Guanyu thought that he was going to attack him, his whole body was on guard. He was proud of his extraordinary martial arts, but if they really fought, he might not be his match. But the man in front of him, who was exuding a strong aura, suddenly had his cold aura dissipate, and he returned to his previous indifference. He looked at him indifferently. There's one more thing that I forgot to tell you. I'll be obedient. At that moment, Shang Guanyu was in a trance, thinking that he was hallucinating. Mo Wushang didn't attack him, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't. His gentle face became frighteningly ferocious. He suddenly attacked the man. Mo Wushang, I'd like to see what you're up to. Be careful, master. The gust of wind from the palm was filled with a fierce and strong inner force. Even from such a distance, Ji Chu could feel the fierceness from the palm, as if it could kill a person with a single blow. Ji Chu narrowed his eyes. This Shang Guanyu's martial arts were not weak. He could actually be compared with him. Mo Wushang stood there, not moving a single step. When Shang Guanyu swung his palm towards him, Mo Wushang didn't move at all. He tilted his head, as if he was seriously thinking about a problem. What kind of injury would make Ji He feel sorry for him? Every night, she would hug him to sleep out of guilt. Ji Chu. He blinked his eyes. Seeing that the palm was about to hit him, Master, why didn't you react? Shang Guanyu didn't seem to expect that he wouldn't dodge. He just stood there and took the blow. The corner of his mouth curled into a cruel smile. Even if Mo Wushang's martial arts were higher, this palm of his was not to be trifled with. If Mo Wushang didn't dodge, he would definitely be severely injured. With that in mind, he gathered all his inner energy in his palm. He was determined to kill the man in front of him. Mo Wushang stood motionless, but Ji Chu couldn't just watch his master get injured. His figure flashed and appeared in front of Mo Wushang. He said coldly, Shang Guanyu, how dare you attack my master? Bang! Before he could take the blow for Mo Wushang, he felt a heavy force behind him, and his whole body was thrown out. His eyes widened in shock as he watched Mo Wushang take the fatal blow from Shang Guanyu. Damn! It was Ji Chu who vomited blood. This was not the way to fight for favor, right? His master was obviously playing with his life. Chapter 306. Isn't that Lady Murong's carriage? On the street, because of the extravagance of the visitors, the pedestrians consciously opened up a path. Shen Yueji looked at the graceful young woman sitting upright in the carriage. This time, she was not sitting in a horse carriage, but on a sedan chair carried by 4 people. Her white robes could not hide the paleness and haggardness of her face. Even her eyes were red and swollen. There were thick traces of blood. She looked even more dignified. She was only passing by a street in the capital, but the atmosphere was so oppressive that no one dared to breathe. This Lady Murong is really something. She just lost her son, but she can still swagger around here. She's dressed in plain white, without the silks and satins. Where does she plan to go? Where else could she go? It should be the nearby bright light temple. At this moment, an old woman next to her opened her mouth to speak. Hearing this, Shen Yueji looked at the old woman and asked in confusion, Bright Light Temple. Miss, are you a local from the capital? How come you don't even know about this? Perhaps it was because she wanted to avoid trouble, but the old woman could not control her own mouth. She moved closer to Shen Yueji's ear and whispered, ever since the late Empress passed away, this Murong Furen would run over to Bright Light Temple every once in a while. I heard from the servants in the Prime Minister's Fu that Murong Furen was helping her daughter cross over. AI. At this point, the old woman could not help but sigh. The late Empress was really too pitiful. Tell me, they were both Lady Murong's children, but why was the treatment so different? I heard that when the late Empress died, it was Lady Murong who urged the Emperor to kill her. Not to mention pleading for mercy, she did not even shed a tear. How can there be such a mother in this world? Let's go. Miss, where are you going? I'm following her. Shin Yueji replied calmly. Are you following Lady Murong to Bright Light Temple? Shuangshi asked. Yes. Bright Light Temple was the only temple in the capital. Every day, many people came here to burn incense and pray for blessings. Shin Yueji followed behind Murong Yun's carriage and entered the temple's main entrance. There were not many people who came to burn incense at Guangguang Temple today. The one who received them was a young monk. Under his guidance, Shin Yueji followed him to the front of a Buddha statue. Stepping in, there were 4 soft sleepers in front of the Buddha statue. Different from other temples, the soft sleepers here were red. She saw Murong Yun, with the help of the nanny, slowly walked to the soft sleepers and knelt down. After the little monk gave her 3 sticks of incense, he said, Amitabha, and retreated. Shin Yueji was not too far away from her. There were 2 soft cushions between them. She took the 3 sticks of incense from the little monk and nodded. Murong Yun closed her eyes and murmured a few words. She slowly placed the incense and worshipped it devoutly. Shin Yueji also learned from her. After inserting the incense, she suddenly turned her head and looked at Murong Yun's pale and plain face. She smiled and said, Did the sun rise from the west today? It was not easy for Ben Gong to return to the mansion, but unexpectedly I met Lady Murong. Shin Yueji's words caused the woman, who was concentrating on her worship, to pause for a moment. She then turned her head to look at Shin Yueji, obviously recognizing her. So it's Imperial Consort Shin. Her tone was indifferent. It could not be said to be respectful, but it could not be considered disrespectful either. Chapter 307. With Shuangshi's support, Shin Yueji slowly stood up and smiled. Lady Murong must be joking. You are the elder and Ben Gong is the junior. In the palace, Ben Gong has to call the Empress older sister. If you salute and older sister finds out, I'm afraid she won't let it go. I heard that this Bright Light Temple is deeply loved by the people of the capital. When the people of the capital have nothing to do, they always like to come here to chant sutras, burn incense and pray. I have nothing to do in the Fu, so Shuangshi brought me here to worship the Buddha statue. On the other hand, Lady Murong. At this point, she paused and smiled faintly. I heard that something happened to third young Master Gu today. Ben Gong didn't think that Lady Murong would be in such a good mood to come here to burn incense and worship Buddha. That's true. At this point, her words became more understanding. When the late Empress died, didn't Lady Murong also not take it to heart? She even specially begged the Emperor to execute her, saying that she couldn't give birth to such a shameless daughter. Seeing the change in Murong Yun's expression, Shin Yueji acted as if she didn't see it and continued to speak. The late Empress was also Lady Murong's biological daughter. Looking at Lady Murong's attitude towards the late Empress, it made Ben Gong think that the eldest daughter of the Gu family, Gu Yuqin, was taken away from Lady Murong's enemy and raised in the Fu. Ben Gong thought that Lady Murong was unperturbed by everything, including her own biological daughter. I didn't think that Ben Gong had overestimated you. So you were only targeting the late Empress and not the other children that Lady Murong gave birth to. Shin Guifei, what do you mean by this? Murong Yun narrowed her eyes dangerously. Her pair of dark eyes were like an icy peak. cold and dangerous. Her pale cheeks looked like they were covered with a layer of snow, so white that even the best rouge couldn't hide the deathly paleness that emanated from within. Nothing much. It's just that after entering the palace, I heard many of the servants in the palace talk about the glorious past of your Gu family. In a moment of curiosity, I couldn't help but say a few more words. In addition, recently, Lady Murong's third son was brutally murdered on the streets. She covered her lips as she smiled, her beautiful eyes were filled with hope. Lady Murong, you must restrain your grief and accept the vicissitudes of life. Which family doesn't have bad things befalling them? In any case, you've already lost a daughter, you're not afraid of losing another son. Shin Yueji. How dare you? Murong Yun's face was cold and gloomy, but she did not say a word. The old nanny next to her was so angry that her face changed drastically. She pointed at Murong Yun angrily and shouted coldly, "It's not up to an outsider like you to interfere in the affairs of the Gu family. Don't think that just because the emperor thinks highly of you, you can climb all over him. The higher you stand, the harder you fall. Shin Yueji, don't be too happy. Yeah, the higher you stand, the harder you fall. Your Gu family has been standing too high and proud for too long. It's time for you to fall from your high place and personally experience what it feels like to be trampled by others." Yu Zhang Huilan's face turned ashen and she rubbed her hands together, wanting to step forward and hit her. When Shuangxi saw this, she stood in front of her and raised her head, breathing heavily through her nostrils. "Your Gu family is highly regarded by the emperor and my Shen family does not fall behind in the slightest. You dare to hit my young miss, let's see if you have the ability to bear the consequences." Zhang Nanny. Chapter 308. Murong Yun shouted in a low voice and Zhang Huilan reluctantly retreated behind her. A pair of fierce eyes glared at Shin Yueji, wishing that he could tear the two of them into 1,000 holes. Murong Yun took a step forward. She pursed her lips and smiled contemptuously. "Regardless of your status and seniority, imperial concubine, you are a junior. It's not up to you, a junior, to comment on my Gu family's matters. I'm not being nosy. I'm just curious. I heard that Lady Murong would personally go to Phoenix restaurant every day to taste its dishes. Not only that, after eating their fill, every few days, they would come to this bright light temple to burn incense and pray to Buddha. What I am curious about is that Lady Murong does not seem to be the type of person who believes in ghosts and gods. Your Gu family has status and wealth, you have everything, this Buddha statue." At this point, Shin Yueji raised her head and looked at the Buddha statue that was sitting cross-legged high up in the sky. She smiled. "Just now, I heard from the master of Bright Light Temple that only people who are haunted by nightmares day and night and feel uneasy will come here to pray." Imperial concubine Shen. Murong Yun's face turned cold. Shin Yueji was not afraid at all. She walked a few steps on the spot and then turned back and approached her. "I've seen all kinds of tricks used by concubines in the palace recently. I've also secretly gotten rid of a few concubines who don't know what's good for them. In the well behind Phoenix Perching Palace, I've even fished out a few concubines' swollen corpses that had been soaked for a few days. No matter what, I've done something bad and killed people. I'm timid, so I came to this temple to pray for peace and to avoid nightmares in the future." As for Lady Murong, she leaned closer to her and laughed complacently before whispering, "Lady Murong, ever since the late Empress passed away, have you been unable to eat or sleep well, unable to sleep at night? Are you haunted by nightmares? In your dreams, it was always the terrifying face of the late Empress that was nailed all over, sticking to your face. Disturb your dreams." Hearing this, Murong Yun staggered a few times and her body fell backward uncontrollably. Nanny Zhang, who was next to her, supported her in time, and she almost fell to the ground. She looked at Shin Yueji's bright and beautiful little face. Previously in the capital, she had also met this arrogant and despotic eldest daughter of the Shin family several times. But because of the relationship between the Gu and Shin families, the two of them looked at each other with hostility, but no one took the initiative to talk to her. She didn't expect that Shin Yueji would take the initiative to talk to her today. She was indeed a little surprised, but when she heard Gu Yueqin mentioned, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, forcing herself to calm down. Ever since Gu Yueqin's death, every night, she would dream of Gu Yueqin. Gu Yueqin's nail-studded face was right next to hers. Sometimes, she would lie in Gu Yueqin's embrace and cry loudly, asking why Gu Yueqin, who was also her daughter, would treat her this way. She hated herself for being biased. Her eyes were red, and she wanted to strangle herself. Every time she was about to be suffocated by her, Murong Yun would wake up from her dream. When he woke up, his back was soaked in cold sweat. She laughed coldly. Who does Gu Yueqin think she is? I only have one daughter, and that's Yin-er. What right does she have to be compared to Yin-er? Why should I be unable to eat or sleep well? Is that so? Shin Yueji looked at her indifferently. Chapter 309. Even if she had already experienced life and death, Shin Yueji would never forget that this elegant woman in front of her was her real mother. She was the daughter that she had given birth to after 10 months of pregnancy. She had once fantasized that one day, she would be able to hold her in her arms like how she had treated Gu Yueyin, her hands gently caressing her hair, caressing her, coaxing her and joking with her. But that had never happened. Even now, after Gu Yueqin had died for so long, not only did she not feel any remorse or pity, she could still use such an indifferent and slanderous tone to slander her after her death. It was she who did not abide by the virtue of being a woman and committed adultery. For her to end up like this, she only has herself to blame. Although Lady Murong is not a woman of the imperial harem, you are still someone who has been through it. I believe that there are some things that I don't need to say for you to know. What do you mean? You think that we framed Gu Yueqin for committing adultery. Whether it's framing or not, isn't Lady Murong the clearest about it? Everyone in the capital knows how Gu Yueqin lived in the Gu family. Perhaps from the moment she married His Majesty, it was all part of your scheme. You're just using her as a stepping stone for your future. For a moment, Murong Yun was speechless. What does my Gu family's matters have to do with you? Didn't Imperial Consort hate Gu Yueqin so much? Why? Now you're crying out for her. Suddenly, I have nothing to do, so I wanted to chat with Lady Murong. In addition, I saw that your eyes had turned red from crying for your son at the Phoenix restaurant. That pair of usually calm eyes were now bloodshot. I only felt that the late Empress was even more pitiful. When I was in the residence, Mother often said to me that in this world, there are no parents who do not love their children. Before eldest brother, Mother had a miscarriage. Because of this, Mother was depressed and felt that it was a pity for the baby who did not have the chance to walk through this world. I would like to ask Lady Murong, since you don't like it, why did you give birth to it? Why didn't you just give her a bowl of abortion pills and send her to meet the King of Hell when you knew she was pregnant? Wouldn't that have been great? The tone of her voice was full of hatred, which made Murong Yun feel the hatred and resentment emanating from her. She looked up in shock. The daughter you gave birth to after 10 months of pregnancy is a piece of flesh that fell from your body. Isn't the child innocent? Since you gave birth to her, but you are not responsible for her, Madame Murong, sometimes, there are some prices that you must bear. Shin Yueji didn't continue talking to her. When she met her gaze, she smiled faintly, walked past her, and left. Madam. Not long after she left, Murong Yun suddenly covered her chest. Her face was pale and the cold sweat on her forehead was like beads of water, rolling down drop by drop. How are you, madam? Madam. Murong Yun grabbed her hand. I'm fine. Take me home. She had to take responsibility for the child she gave birth to. Shin Yueji's words before she left still echoed in her ears. If she was responsible for her, then who would be responsible for her? She should not have been born in this world. She should not have destroyed her. Her face was filled with endless resentment and hatred. Chapter 310. Miss, are you all right? What happened to you? Why did you suddenly talk to Madame Murong about the late Empress? Following behind Shin Yueji, Shuangxi looked worriedly at her pale face. If Murong Yun's face was pale because of her anger, then her Miss's face was the same. She was thin and pitiful. She had never seen such a young lady before. She gave her the feeling of a homeless and pitiful little girl who had been abandoned by the world. Miss, she tugged at her sleeve from behind. What happened to you? Do you sympathize with the late Empress? This servant feels the same as Mississippi. This Gu family is really despicable. But the late Empress is dead, and that Gu Yuqin can't be compared to Mississippi madam, and the general love you so much. There's also the eldest young master. He can't wait to protect you from the pain. And Shuangxi's words were on the tip of her tongue, but when she saw the person in front of her, she suddenly stopped. Zhang Sun Wuyan's hair was disheveled. She didn't have any rouge or powder to set off her face. She looked like a beggar with a lot of dust on her face. Especially the resentment in her eyes. She glared at Shin Yueji, as if she wanted to cut her into 1,000 pieces. Shin Yueji's gaze fell on her. She stared at her for a long time before she recognized her. Shin Yueji, are you proud now? Happy? He crossed his arms over his chest and looked down at her ugly state from above. Where did this beggar come from? You even dare to block my Miss's way. I think you don't know what's good for you. Shuangxi stood in front of Shin Yueji to protect her. Although the weak Zhang Sun Wuyan could not withstand a single blow, she was really not worried that she could hurt her family's young miss. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. She was really afraid that this crazy woman would harm her family's young miss. Zhang Sun Wuyan glared at her fiercely. If her eyes were a knife, then Shin Yueji's was already riddled with holes. Now, everyone in the capital knows that I have been chased out by my father. From now on, I am no longer the second young miss of the Zhang Sun family. I am now a beggar in the marketplace. Any beggar can trample on me and humiliate me. Shin Yueji, how did I offend you? Why are you treating me like this? It's not enough that you ruined my sister, now you want to ruin me too. Back then, the two of us followed behind you. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Now that you've gained the upper hand, you think we're an eyesore, so you're kicking us away, right? Shin Yueji stood there without saying a word. Her indifferent gaze swept over her from head to toe. It was her calm look that made Zhang Sun Wuyan even angrier. Sheng Guanyu is obviously the man you don't want. How can you be so vicious? You don't even allow others to covet the man you don't want. Who do you think you are? Do you want all the outstanding men in the world to be infatuated with you? Will you only be satisfied if they don't marry for the rest of their lives? Zhang Sun Wuyan was so angry that her chest heaved up and down violently. You slut! In the end, she took a few heavy breaths and couldn't help but curse. Pa, Double Happiness's slap was merciless. Zhang Sun Wuyan already knew that she would be slapped. What kind of person was Shin Yueji? How could he allow her to bully him? Chapter 311. Now that I have been driven out by my father, I am no longer a member of the Zhangsun family. I have nothing, and there is nothing to be afraid of. Shin Yueji, you and the regent have an affair in secret. I want to spread this matter. I want everyone in the capital to know that the Shin family has raised a good daughter. You, imperial concubine Shin, who has only been in the palace for more than a month, is debauched. Let His Majesty see clearly that you, Shin Yueji, are hypocritical. You look like you can't live without a man. Are you done? Zhang Sun Wuyan shouted so much and scolded so much. In the end, what she got was Shin Yueji's indifferent 3 words. Finished speaking. She was stunned. Why was the expression on her face so calm? Didn't she hear what she was saying? Why couldn't she see a trace of panic on her face? Or was she not afraid at all? The entire harem has long been spread by your sister that I have an affair with the regent. I am not afraid that the people in the capital will know. After all, His Majesty will not touch me now. As for you, have you forgotten how your sister's tongue was cut off by me? Shin Yueji bent down in front of her and lifted her chin with one hand. This strong sense of pressure made Zhang Sun Wuyan subconsciously want to look away, but Shin Yueji did not give her the opportunity and forced her to look directly at herself. Although I am not afraid, I hate those who gossip. Although what you said is the truth, I don't like to hear these words spit out from your mouth. Since you have said that you are not a member of the Zhangsun family. She dangerously narrowed her eyes and smiled. Then your life and death, shouldn't Zhangsun Darren care? If I hear you spread rumors about me and the regent in the capital today, you know the consequences. Second Miss Zhangsun, I will make you live a life worse than death. You will be 100 times more miserable than your sister. Zhang Sun Wuyan had long been scared speechless. Originally, she still hoped to use these words to threaten Shin Yueji, forcing her to give her a good place to go and give her a large sum of money. This way, she would not have to worry about food and clothing in the days to come. But she didn't expect that she would be so threatened by her that she couldn't speak. Her mouth trembled and turned purple. When Shin Yueji passed by her, she kicked her hard. The force was so strong that the moment she got up from the ground, she was kicked back down again. The woman's ruthlessness proved that her master was in a bad mood. She didn't dare to say another word. She lay on the ground and didn't dare to look at her until she was far away. The sound of light footsteps rang in her ears, and Zhang Sun Wuyan slowly raised her head. The white robe in front of her caused her heart to stir. With some anticipation, she slowly raised her gaze. When she saw Shang Guanyu's gentle face, her face lit up with joy. In the next moment, tears uncontrollably fell from her eyes. Chapter 312. Shang Guanyu let her cry. His snow-white robe was stained with her snot, tears, and the dust on her face, which was dirty and disgusting. His dark eyes flashed, and when she gradually stopped crying, he bent down in front of her. His slender fingers caressed her tear-stained little face. Zhang Sun Wuyan was immersed in the tenderness he gave her. Her little face rubbed the man's fingers, and her face was covetous. Young Master Shangguan, his fingers slowly moved to her snow-white neck. The woman's ragged clothes couldn't cover her snow-white skin, which was delicate and smooth. His fingers lingered on her snow-white neck, tossing and turning. Zhang Sun Wuyan wanted to stick her whole body to him, and she gasped, "N. Shangguan." Young Master Shangguan, her little face was red, and she whispered while panting. However, this enjoyment didn't last long. As the man's big hand on her neck, it suddenly tightened. The woman suddenly came to her senses, her eyes widened, and her pair of crimson little face instantly turned purple because of suffocation. She stared at the man in front of her in fear, and wanted to struggle. But before her hands could touch the man's hands, she only heard a crack. Her neck slumped to the side, and her eyes were wide open before she died. Seeing her whole body fall to the ground, Shang Guanyu retracted his hand and looked at her indifferently for a while. He cleaned her clothes, and his obscure eyes fell on her messy legs. The coldness flashed in his eyes. The mottled marks on her body were so conspicuous, and it was obvious that she had just gone through a scuffle. Seeing this, his tense mouth evoked a gentle smile. It was just right, and he didn't have to think of a way to help her deal with it. Shi Lo. A black shadow appeared in front of him. Young master. Throw her at the gate of Prince Regent's mansion. Ji Lo looked at Zhang Sun Wuyan, who was dressed inconspicuously and had red marks all over her body. His face changed slightly, but he still said respectfully, yes. The girl he had been missing for a long time had already left. Shang Guanyu got up and looked in the direction of Shen Yueji's departure, as if he could still feel the fragrance she left in the air during the time she left. He gently twirled his fingers, and there was a trace of determination and ruthlessness in his calm eyes. For you, I'm willing to stay by your side and let you hit and scold me. Since that's the case, I still can't win your favor. In the remaining days, I will use my own methods to make you realize who in this world is worthy of you trusting and relying on. Who truly loved you. Maybe, you'll hate me for it. But this is the price you must bear. I have sacrificed for you for so many years, it is time for you to repay me, whether you are willing or not. I just want to keep you by my side. The rest of my life is very long. I will use my whole life to make it up to you, to love you. In his hand, there was a simple hand-carved wooden figurine. She might not remember it anymore. When he was very young, she had personally carved this little person. He didn't know who it was, but because it was ugly, she quickly lost her patience and threw it away. Coincidentally, he passed by and kept the little person with him, imagining that she had specially carved this little person for him. He closed his eyes, and his dark pupils rolled. He suddenly clenched his big palm. His palm still had the residual warmth of Zhang Sun Wuyan before her death. The trembling from his palm made Shang Guanyu unable to come to his senses for a long time. Chapter 313. Back to the general's mansion. She saw that the atmosphere of the servants in the mansion was not quite right. Even the little servant girl who was sweeping the floor hurriedly took the broom and retreated in a fluster after she finished her task. Shuangxi followed behind Shen Yueji and seemed to notice something. She grabbed the collar of a servant girl who was about to slip away. Xiao Xia, tell me, what happened? Why is the general's mansion so quiet today? It was so quiet that there was no sense of humanity. The general's mansion had been lively for so many years, but it was rare to see such a calm scene today. The servant girl called Xiao Xia trembled as she raised her head to look at Shen Yueji. The emperor's trusted aide has sent a message. Tomorrow, the emperor will be returning to the capital. He asked Miss to prepare a package and leave for the palace tomorrow. So that was it. Shen Yueji understood more. The general's mansion was in a gloomy atmosphere today. It was mostly because she was going back to the capital. She nodded and said, "There's nothing for you to do here. You can leave." After hearing this news, Shuangxi's face was also gloomy. "Miss, how long do you think we've been back? The days in the palace feel like years. It's been a few days since we've been back, but this servant still feels like only a short while has passed." "Hey, miss, where are you going?" Shuangxi was complaining about this servant. Seeing that Shen Yueji had gone somewhere else, she hurriedly chased after her. Walking all the way to the study, she saw that the three people she wanted to see were there. Shen He's resolute face was full of seriousness. Even Shen Yueji's handsome face, which had never been serious, was tense at this moment. Her eyes swept over the faces of the three people and saw their expressions. Her sharp eyes saw that there was an opened letter on the table. Thinking of the servant girl's words, Shin Yueji stepped forward and took the letter in her hand. The handwriting was strong and clear. She recognized at a glance that it was Feng Juqing's handwriting. There's a war in the South City. She narrowed her eyes and glanced over the few short lines. If the content in front was written by Feng Juqing to her, then the latter part was written about the South City. The South City was very close to Nanyu. Out of the 4 great countries, one had fallen, leaving only 3. Nanyu was one of them. The Southern Peak Emperor was cruel and tyrannical. Rumors about him were known by all the countries. He ascended to the throne at the age of 12, and now he already had 9 thoughts. Tarnishing his aunt, insulting his sister-in-law, coveting his aunt, unbearable to look at. Because of this kind of emperor, even the people of Nanyu became like him. They bullied their sisters-in-law and married their younger sisters. The entire country of Nanyu was in chaos. Logically speaking, such a southern mountain should have been the target of a united crusade by all the countries, but the emperor of Southern Mountain wasn't jealous. Although he was obsessed with women, he was also a wise and vicious ruler. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to maintain one of the 3 great empires for so many years, even though he had done so many bad things over the years, even bringing shame to the people of Southern Mountain. Yet he was still able to maintain the position of one of the 3 great empires. As for the war in South City, this was the territory between Nanyu and the Feng Kingdom. Half of the Feng Kingdom was Nanyu's. Chapter 314. Shin Yueji knew about the South City. Although it was said that both countries occupied half of it, the people of Southern Mountain had been eyeing it for a long time. Even the number of soldiers stationed there was only half of the usual number, and all of them were brave and valiant soldiers of Southern Peak, fierce people who had drunk human blood on the battlefield and beheaded many enemies. Shin Yueji placed the letter on the table and could not help but think that in the days when she was still the empress, Gu Yueyin had vaguely mentioned the matter of Nanyu to her. Feng Juqing had long set his sights on the Shin family. The Shin family's soldiers had followed Shin He through fire and water for many years and were even more loyal to him. Even without the commander's seal, they would only listen to Shin He. So, Feng Juqing wanted to get rid of them. In the name of pacifying the war in the South City, he had Shin He lead these soldiers who had gone through fire and water with him to fight in the South City. In this way, if they won, his Shin family would lose more than half of their soldiers. Feng Juqing was obviously rewarding them, but secretly, he was gradually weakening the Shin family's power. If he lost, the emperor was furious. The Shin family had a high position, but they couldn't even win a battle. At that time, they would be ridiculed by the court officials and the people in the capital. No matter what, it was not good for the Shin family. The thin envelope slowly turned into shreds in Shin Yueji's palm. Feng Juqing. Sure enough, the gentleness in the past was just an act. You still can't change your true colors of a hypocrite. Does the emperor really want to cripple our Shin family's power? Everyone in the room fell into silence. Shin Yueji's stiff body turned around and her gaze fell on Shin He's face. Father is loyal to his majesty, but he still gauges the heart of a gentleman with his own mean measure. Shin He shook his head and sighed. The heart of an emperor is hard to fathom. Although the emperor did not give a general idea in this letter, these few words are enough for us to prepare. I, your father, am someone who spends most of his time on the battlefield. I don't really care about these puny Southern Mountain soldiers. Shin Yueji opened her mouth. He wanted to say something. She understood Feng Juqing, but that did not mean that Shin He understood him. What he understood was an emperor who cared about the world and the people. What she knew was a selfish man who schemed for the sake of the throne. If she still had some expectations and feelings for him before and repeatedly tried to absolve him, perhaps her death was really just a misunderstanding. He was so affectionate, even though she knew that he was best at acting gentle and affectionate, she couldn't help but want to absolve him. But now, there was a cold glint in her eyes, but she covered it up fiercely. Never again. Apart from the throne, everything else was an eyesore in his eyes. Everything else could be used. Little sister, I know you're worried about Dad. You think that Dad is getting old. In a place like the battlefield, where there's killing, you think that Dad can't lift a broadsword, and you're afraid that he'll be at a disadvantage. But it's hard to change the Emperor's life. In our Shen family, who asked Father to be such a promising person? Shen Yueqi also felt her emotions. He went forward and wrapped his arms around her shoulders, but it's okay. Don't worry. The soldiers of our Shen family have followed Father through life and death for so many years. They are loyal to Father. On the battlefield, they will definitely protect Father well. They will never let Father be hurt. Yes, your father is fighting for the people of Feng country. His identity is also for the people of Feng country. Chapter 3:15. Father Shen and Mother Shen were straightforward people, but Shen Yueji knew their loyalty to Feng Juqing. Rather than saying that the Shen family was loyal to the Emperor, it was more accurate to say that they were loyal to the people of Feng country. As for Feng Juqing, because of his own selfish desires, he wanted to put them to death. He wanted to get rid of all the prestigious officials of Feng country. Shen Yueji's heart was cold. The man she loved for 9 years actually had such a disgusting face. The soldiers of Southern Mountain were all bloodthirsty, cruel, and cunning. Shen he was already old, he would definitely be at a disadvantage if he went to the southern city. There are many powerful youths in the court. Why does the Emperor want Father to be the vanguard? Mother is only going to get rid of some small soldiers of Southern Mountain. Father has been leading the army for so many years, fighting dangerous battles that benefit the people. The place he went before is the battlefield that suits his identity, not those small places in the southern city with some insignificant soldiers. There were rules on the battlefield, but the people of Southern Mountain were different. They had no rules, only tricks. According to Shinhe's personality, he disdained playing dirty with others. He didn't know how, but it didn't mean others didn't know. Hearing Shen Yueji's words, Shen Qiu seemed to understand this point. On the contrary, Shinhe didn't care at all. What's wrong with that? It's all for the benefit of the people. Small soldiers are easier to deal with. Don't worry. Your father has won so many battles for so many years and narrowly escaped death on the battlefield many times. Haven't I been lucky enough to survive until now? These small soldiers of Southern Mountain are easier to deal with. The people of Southern Mountain are arrogant and ruthless. This kind of country, with such a cruel emperor, won't be arrogant for long. A person like Shin he would do whatever Feng Juqing told him to do. He wouldn't understand the schemes of the emperor at all. She closed her eyes and didn't speak anymore. In the past, it was a fluke. This time, she didn't believe that Shinhe could return safely from Southern Mountain. Mother, I have something to say to you in private. Come out with me. Shinhe looked at her, then at Shinqiu. His face twitched. What's wrong? Shinqiu also slowly understood the meaning behind her words. Nodding her head, she followed her out of the study. Are you dissatisfied with the Emperor's arrangement? When His Majesty returns to the capital tomorrow, you will make Father bedridden with a serious illness. Shinqiu was shocked. This is deceiving the ruler. Normally, she could let her do whatever she wanted, but when it came to serious matters, Shinqiu naturally knew the seriousness of the matter. Mother, can't you see? The Emperor's intentions are not Nan Yu or the citizens of Feng Nation. He is targeting our Shen family. This. Shin Qiu looked doubtful. Our Shin family is loyal to the Feng Kingdom. We serve the people of the Feng Kingdom wholeheartedly and have made countless contributions to the Feng Kingdom. Heaven and earth can prove our loyalty. The Emperor has no reason to target our Shin family. Could it be? She thought of a bad guess and looked at Shin Yueji. Is it because of the Gu family? It was Gu Yueyin who whispered pillow talk into his ear, so he wants to target our Shin family. Gu family. Chapter 316. The Gu family's son had just died. Feng Jiuqing might be outside, but his heart was in the capital. He must have been watching every move in the capital. He couldn't touch the Gu family now, so he had set his sights on her Shin family. Little by little, the power of the two great clans in the capital would collapse, and he would slowly reap the benefits. This way, no one would suspect him, and no one would know that he was the mastermind behind all this. He had everything planned out just because he was the emperor and could control them at will. Even if he had planned to send them to their deaths, if something really happened to Shin He in the South City, the officials and people of Feng country could blame this mistake on Nanyu. They would hate the people of Nanyu to the core and wouldn't blame Feng Jiuqing at all, including her Shin family. Thinking of this, Shin Yueji's heart started to turn cold. The cold penetrated her limbs and bones. This was the Feng Jiuqing she knew, he had planned everything perfectly. But Shin Yueji didn't know how to tell Shin Qiu. Ever since she entered the palace, Shin Qiu was dissatisfied with Feng Jiuqing, but she knew he was a kind and good emperor. She naturally didn't know what kind of person he was. Shin Yueji shook her head. Mother also knows that the people of Nanyu are all cunning and vicious. When father led the army to war, he went to the battlefield, but the South City isn't a battlefield. It's just a small place between the two countries. The soldiers of Nanyu are cruel and good at scheming. Father, on the other hand, is good at fighting. He only knows how to act rashly and doesn't know how to calm down and think of a perfect plan. He only knows how to fight to the death. Mother, this will only bring harm to father. The emperor knows that father is on an unofficial battlefield. Unless there is a civil official with him, if father is alone, he will definitely be at a disadvantage. But the emperor still let father lead the vanguard and let him, a first-ranked general of Feng country, go to the South City to face some small soldiers of Nanyu. Mother, don't you think the emperor's intention is too hard to understand? Shin Qiu was not a stupid person. When she heard Shin Yueji say these things in a few words, she frowned. Er's meaning is that the emperor really wants to get rid of our Shin family's power and not really wants your father to go to the southern city to kill the southern mountain soldiers. They're just some small soldiers from southern peak. The Feng nation doesn't lack other generals below the second rank. Why did you mobilize so many people and let father go? Father is fighting a big battle, not going to the South City to kill those southern peak soldiers. Shin Qiu's face gradually became cold. My Shin family is loyal to the emperor, so why would he do this? A tall tree attracts the wind. Just the Shin family alone occupies half of the Feng country, and there's also the Gu family. Mother, His Majesty has been wary of our Gu and Shin families for a long time. Gu family. Does His Majesty also? The Gu family had followed the emperor until now. Their loyalty was known by all the citizens of the Feng nation. Why is the emperor also? If the emperor even schemed against the Gu family, what about the Shin family? If it's really like what Ji has said, then the emperor's love for the empress. Shin Yueji smiled coldly. Mother, have you forgotten how many of the emperor's love is real? Chapter 317. She only had one daughter. In fact, from the day she entered the palace, she was unwilling. The Shin family didn't need her child to enter the palace to pave the way for them. Ji-er was not their chess piece, but their daughter. They only hoped that Ji-er could marry a good husband in the future and live a peaceful and happy life. They didn't ask for much. If you don't enter the palace, how can you guess the emperor's mind and know his character? Mother, no matter what you say to father, before tomorrow, father must refuse the emperor with the reason that he is sick in bed. But, your father just received a letter from the emperor today. Tomorrow, when the emperor returns to the capital, he will be sick in bed. Isn't this too obvious? It's not obvious, at least it's obvious to others, but not to the emperor. When facing Feng Zhiqing, this kind of thing must be done in reverse. Shen Yueji smiled slightly. Father is careless and will not lie. The emperor knows this, but I have an idea. Say it. Mother, why don't you make things difficult for him? There is no need to tell father about this. It's good enough that eldest brother knows. Eldest brother is good at using poison. Let eldest brother make some medicine that can make people gasp for breath and make it look like a serious illness to trick father into drinking it. In this way, father doesn't know the reason. Even if the emperor sees it, he can't say anything and will only say that he is seriously ill. This is a good idea, but will the emperor believe it? Shen Yueji nodded. The emperor will believe it. She frowned and wanted to say something more, but then she thought of something and stopped. Compared to Shen-He's honesty, this Shen Wuqi had a lot of tricks. After saying this, Shen Yueji said goodbye and left. Shen Qiu suddenly called out to her. Shen Yueji stopped and didn't look back. Shen Qiu walked in front of her and stared at her for a long time. During this time, the look from her eyes was complicated and hard to understand. Shen Qiu held her hand firmly in her palm. Ji-er, you have grown up. In the past, you never worried about these things. Father and mother also hoped that you could live a carefree life. You shouldn't worry about these troublesome things. Mother, as long as I am not dead, I will not let the Shen family decline. Ji-er, just as mother said, daughter has already grown up and is already a part of the Shen family. Daughter will not let anyone use our Shen family, and will not let the Shen family make unprofitable sacrifices. Shen Qiu suddenly smiled and nodded. Even so, I still hope that you can return to being the carefree you once were. I don't know what you've been through in the palace during this period of time, but as long as father, mother, and your eldest brother are alive, we can protect you. Even the emperor can't touch you. Shen Yueji looked at her with teary eyes. She had never thought that one day, she would have such a happy family. Her parents who loved her dearly and her brother who always thought about her. To her, this was like a longing. But now, she really had everything, but it was like a dream. She was afraid that she would wake up from this dream. She threw herself into Shen Qiu's arms and cried silently, Mother. Silly girl, why are you crying? Chapter 318. She said goodbye to Mother Shen. Shen Yueji cried all the way back to Jilan courtyard. Mo Wushang sat on the soft couch, waiting for her to come back. He could hear her sobbing from afar. His handsome face stiffened and his figure stagnated. Then, he suddenly stood up and dashed out. What's wrong? He appeared in front of Shen Yueji in a flash. Seeing her crying face, he suddenly felt a burst of heartache. Shen Yueji saw him and threw herself into his arms, crying so hard that she couldn't catch her breath. My parents are so good to me, sob sob sob. Mo Wushang, the corners of his mouth twitched as he stroked her head, comforting her. When she cried a little more smoothly, the man's gloomy voice rang in her ears. Only them. My big brother is good to me. Shen Yueji continued to sob softly. The man's fingertips turned white, but he still stroked her hair gently. What else? What else? Shin Yueji stuck half of her head out of his arms and stared at him for a while with teary eyes. She knew what answer he wanted. She pursed her lips and didn't mention him. That's all. Mo Wushang, in the next second, her collar was lifted by the man. Looking at the man's sinister face, Mo Wushang held her chin and forced her to look at him. Ha! That's all. Shin Yueji flailed around in his arms, biting and nibbling at him. With great difficulty, she finally broke free from him and rushed into the room. She slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside, not letting him in. Then, Shin Yueji saw the man floating in through the window with a gloomy face. Her little face was dejected. Without waiting for the man to float over to her, she opened the door again and pushed it out. She even locked the door outside and did not even close the window. Shin Yueji was shocked. She hurriedly opened the door and pulled the man in. Then she went out and locked the door from the outside. In the room, there was the sound of the man gnashing his teeth. Shin Yueji didn't think much of it. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes. Stay inside and reflect on yourself. Mo Wushang, the unshakable and emotionless man, finally couldn't help but want to curse. What did he do wrong? Why should he reflect on himself? The man rubbed the space between his eyebrows, feeling a headache coming on. Open the door and let me out. You know this, a mere door can't keep me. You dare to destroy my door. Don't even think about stepping into the general's mansion for the rest of your life. Comparing Shin father and Shin mother's attitude towards her, Shin Yueji subconsciously compared them with Mo Wushang. Under this comparison, she discovered that he was simply too inferior. Women were vengeful creatures, and she was no exception. Moreover, she was very vengeful. These days, she had become aware of Mo Wushang's emotions. The more sensitive and dependent she was on him, the harder it was for her to forget how he had treated her. When she thought of this, Shin Yueji couldn't help but feel annoyed. Why was he considered as one of the enemies who caused her death? Why did she forgive him so quickly and get together with him? Although she couldn't deny that the little bit of hatred she had for him had long dissipated, her pride was playing tricks on her. She still didn't want to let him do everything and make him happy. The man inside immediately stopped moving after she threatened him with her malicious words. After a long time, she heard the man call out in a hoarse voice. Ji-Chu. Ji-Chu, who was hiding in the dark, was speechless. Chapter 319. It's no use calling Ji-Chu. He betrayed you a long time ago. You reflect on yourself inside. I'm leaving. Mo Wushang was speechless. He didn't know what he had done wrong. What was he reflecting on? Unwilling to give up, he called out again from the inside. Shin Yueji ignored him. Knowing that she was standing at the door, Mo Wushang coaxed her in a low voice. Let's talk. What did I do wrong? Tell me and I'll change. I just don't want to see you. Mo Wushang was speechless. The man felt that he was really wrong this time. After a long time, he took a deep breath. Then close your eyes. I'll look at you. Shin Yueji leaned against the pillar. I'll be blind if I close my eyes. Why should I close them? The man didn't speak again. She didn't know if he was angry or something. Shin Yueji was afraid that if she stayed any longer, she would really let the man out. The emperor should be back tomorrow. The regent should go back too. You're doing this because of him. She didn't explain further. This is what we discussed before. When the emperor is here, you're not allowed to be here. Moreover, adulterers can't be seen in public. Bang! A loud noise came from the door. Shin Yueji jumped in fright. Mo Wushang, if you dare to destroy the door of my Jilon courtyard, I won't let you into the general's residence for the rest of your life. Don't think I'm joking with you. The man inside was also stubborn. I didn't destroy the door. Shin Yueji was speechless. Leaning against the door, Shin Yueji pressed her ear against the door and listened carefully. What did you destroy? I heard a lot of noise. The bed. Inside, the man spat out a word simply and to the point. Without a bed, she wanted to see how that bastard man could sleep in the same room as her. Shin Yueji was speechless. The corner of her mouth twitched as she leaned against the door. Shin Yueji felt her heart ache. That bed was a soft and comfortable big bed that her parents spent the best gold and silver jewelry to make for her. It was made of gold. The gold was ground into powder, and a pile of silk and cotton was added to it, making it extremely soft. In the entire mansion, the price of this bed was almost enough to buy the next general's mansion. Shin Yueji only found out about this later. When she found out about this, she cherished this bed even more. This is great, that goddamn Mo Wushang, she kicked the door a few times. Forget it, I'm going back to the palace tomorrow anyway, I don't need this bed anymore. During the time she was in the palace, her parents would make another bed like this for her. Bang! She had just convinced herself to calm down when the noise from inside the room made her heart bleed. She couldn't help but roar, what are you smashing now? Mo Wushang, I'm warning you, you can't smash anything in my courtyard, not even the tea utensils. If you destroy one, I'll make you pay 10 times, 100 times more. Bang! 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 As soon as she said this, the sound of things smashing in the room almost pierced the sky. As long as he was not forbidden to enter the general's mansion, not to mention 10 times, 100 times more, he was even willing to give her his Prince Regent's mansion. Bang! The fine tea table was smashed by the man's palm. Chapter 320. Miss, what's wrong? What's going on? I heard you banging from afar. Did you attract a thief? Hearing the noise, double happiness ran all the way over. He saw Shin Yueji's small face was so twisted that it was frightening. Her eyes were almost spewing fire as she glared at the closed door. Double happiness was puzzled. Ha! Why didn't Miss go in? Is there a thief inside? With Mrs. Martial Arts, she shouldn't be afraid of this thief, right? Miss? Who's smashing your things inside? This servant will rush in for you and chop this little thief into 1,000 pieces. Double happiness rolled up his sleeves and was about to rush into the room. Shin Yueji, whose heart was bleeding from the smashing, was already numb from the heartache. She turned back and glanced at Double Happiness, who was about to rush in. She didn't say anything and walked away with trembling steps. Double Happiness went straight to the door. Bang! The door was broken. Shin Yueji's footsteps paused. The only thing that was intact was that she had said before that if Mo Wushang dared to break the door of her Jilon courtyard, he would never be able to enter the general's residence again. Therefore, no matter how much he smashed inside, the door of Jilon courtyard was still intact. In the end, Double Happiness just. Filled with righteous indignation and eager to render a meritorious service, Double Happiness rushed into the room and saw the handsome man dressed in black robes with an outstanding bearing. Shocked, she quickly stopped in her tracks. The angry and ferocious expression on her face immediately turned radiant. She bowed deeply. So it's young master. Young master, please be careful of your hands. Don't hurt yourself. Are these enough to smash? If not, I'll bring you some of Mrs.'s favorite treasures. I promise you'll smash to your heart's content. Hearing this, the cold man glanced at her indifferently. Double Happiness immediately straightened his back. You want to cut me into pieces? No, no, no. Young master, you heard wrong. What I said is, I'll cut anyone who breaks the relationship between you and Miss into pieces. Double Happiness wiped the cold sweat off his forehead in fright. Damn, why was the regent acting like a woman? Throwing a tantrum with the young miss and smashing things in the room, wasn't this the usual style of women? Her eyes darted around as she looked at the mess in the room. It was really broken and rotten, and there was a pile of powder on the ground. She couldn't see what it was, but it was crushed to death. It was so pitiful, she silently lit a stick of incense for these dead treasures in her heart. And that priceless bed, seeing this, Shuangxi's heart ached again. Although these things belonged to her young mistress, sigh, all right, it was all her young missus, so she didn't feel any heartache at all. But look at Mrs. Heartache, she was heartbroken. Once the young miss got angry, she would definitely not give her any money this month. Bring out all of your young miss treasures and smash them. Double Happiness blinked. Was the regent really going to smash it? The man narrowed his eyes dangerously, and a sharp aura instantly filled her limbs and bones. The cold eyes were like a sharp sword, shooting straight at Double Happiness. She immediately turned around and rummaged through the drawers and cabinets. From a small secret room below, she moved all the precious bottles and jars that her young miss had hidden before to the man one by one. Young master, you can smash it. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.